Welcome to Crossdressing Stories. Here, we share personal stories, celebrate self-expression. If you're on your own journey or simply curious, you've found your community. Subscribe and join the conversation.
My name is Ethan Thorne and I used to be a rising star. At 26, I was a financial analyst with a golden future, a penthouse apartment overlooking the city, and a confidence that bordered on arrogance. My world was made of numbers, market trends, and the clean, thrilling hum of a stock exchange on the rise. And then Julian Croft happened. Croft wasn't a businessman. He was a corporate predator. A shark in a bespoke suit who had built his empire on the ruins of smaller companies. He left a trail of bankruptcies, shattered lives, and in my father's case, a suicide. Croft had targeted our family's company, a small tech firm my father had spent his life building. He used a brutal hostile takeover strategy, planting false rumors, manipulating stock, and finally swallowing our company whole only to chop it up and sell it for parts. My father, financially ruined and heartbroken, stepped out of his own office window. I lost everything in the span of 6 months. My father, my company, my career. Blacklisted and branded the son of a failure, I went into freefall. The penthouse became a basement apartment. The designer suits became frayed jeans. My confidence turned to ash. For 2 years I lived in the shadow of a life, consumed by a helpless, simmering rage and a grief that wouldn't cool. I tried to sue Croft, but his army of lawyers buried me in paperwork. I tried to go to the press, but Croft owned half the papers in the city. He was untouchable. And then a letter with no return address appeared in my mailbox. It was typed on thick, expensive paper. We know what he did to you. We know what you lost. Julian Croft has made many enemies. A few of us have decided it's time he paid. We can offer you a chance to make him pay. But the cost will be high. If you are interested, be at the address below on Tuesday at 10 p.m. Come alone. It was a flicker of light in a life that had nothing left to lose. Vengeance. It was the only word that still had meaning. That Tuesday I went to the address, ready to sell my soul to whoever would hand me a knife. The address led me to a high-end, anonymous art gallery in a fashionable part of the city. The lights were off, the doors locked. At precisely 10 p.m., a black car with tinted windows pulled up to the curb. A door opened. I got in. The car drove in silence for 20 minutes before pulling into the underground garage of a sleek, modern skyscraper. I was led to an elevator, then to a penthouse apartment that made my old one look like a shoebox. The space was a testament to minimalist wealth, all glass, steel, and shadows, with a breathtaking panoramic view of the city lights. A woman was waiting for me. She was standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows, a silhouette against the glittering skyline. She was tall, impossibly elegant, and radiated an aura of cold, controlled power. "Mr. Thorne," she said, her voice a low, smoky alto. "I'm glad you came." She turned and I recognized her instantly. It was Serafina Rostov. She was a ghost in the financial world, a legendary corporate saboteur and information broker, who was rumored to have toppled small governments and manipulated global markets. No one knew what she really looked like. She was a myth, a boogeyman the powerful whispered about. "You're Rostov," I said, my voice coming out as a dry croak. "I am," she confirmed, a faint, humorless smile on her lips. "And I, like you, have a score to settle with Julian Croft. He cost me a significant amount of money and a valuable asset a few years ago. I am not a forgiving woman." She gestured to a leather couch. I remained standing. "Croft has a weakness," she began, her voice precise and clinical. "And it's the one thing his money can't protect him from. His own vanity. He is a collector. He collects companies, art, and beautiful broken things. His latest obsession is his daughter Isabella." "He has a daughter?" I asked, surprised. Croft's private life was a fortress. From his first marriage, he kept her hidden away in European boarding schools for years. But she has recently returned. She's 23, an artist, and from all reports despises her father. She is also, unfortunately for her, the key to his entire empire. She is the sole heir, and more importantly, the beneficiary of a trust that holds a controlling interest in Croft Enterprises. It's an old family trust, ironclad. As long as she is alive and legally sound, he cannot be removed. "So you want to what?" Kidnap her? I asked, a sick feeling in my stomach. Serafina let out a short, sharp laugh. Don't be so crude. Violence is messy. I prefer a more elegant solution. Croft is looking for a new personal assistant. A gatekeeper for his life. A position of absolute trust. He is notoriously paranoid and difficult to work for. But we have an opportunity to place someone on the inside. Someone who can get close to him, gather information, and when the time is right, exploit his weaknesses. You want me to be his assistant? I said, incredulous. He'd recognize me in a second. Of course he would, she said, her eyes glinting in the dim light. He wouldn't hire Ethan Thorne, but he is looking for a woman, someone sharp, efficient and unassuming, and he would never in a million years suspect her. I stared at her, the implication of her words slowly dawning, a cold, horrifying wave washing over me. You're insane. That's impossible. Is it? Serafina countered, her voice dangerously smooth. She gestured to a previously unnoticed door. Allow me to introduce you to my team. The door opened and two people entered. A man and a woman. The man was older, with the calm, steady hands of a surgeon and the cold, assessing eyes of a scientist. The woman was younger, with a chic, asymmetrical haircut and an artist's intensity. This is Dr. Alistair Finch, Serafina said, gesturing to the man. He is a pioneer in the field of cosmetic and reconstructive surgery. His work is transformative. And this, she said, nodding to the woman, is Eva. She is what one might call a performance artist, a specialist in character creation and vocal coaching. My mind was reeling. This wasn't just a simple disguise. This was a complete, systematic reconstruction of a human being. We have studied Croft's preferences, Serafina continued, circling me like a shark. He hires women who are intelligent but not threatening, polished but not distracting, elegant but forgettable. We will give him exactly what he wants. We will create the perfect corporate ghost. Dr. Finch stepped forward, his gaze clinical as he examined my face. The bone structure is good. Strong jaw, but we can soften that with implants. The brow ridge will need to be shaved down. We'll need a rhinoplasty, of course. The Adam's apple is the most difficult part, but it's manageable. He spoke as if he were discussing the renovation of a building, not the mutilation of my face. The voice is a lower register but workable, Eva added, her eyes narrowed in concentration. We can train you to speak from the head, not the chest. With hormonal therapy to thin the vocal cords, we can achieve a natural-sounding alto. It will take time, and it will be painful. The sheer monstrous scale of their plan was suffocating. They weren't just proposing a disguise, they were proposing an erasure. They wanted to kill Ethan Thorne and build a woman from his bones. This is a one-way street, Mr. Thorne, Serafina said, her voice a low, final warning. The surgical procedures are permanent. There is no going back. You will be provided with a new identity, Anna Scott. You will live as her, you will work as her, you will be her. For as long as it takes. And if I succeed? I asked, my voice a hoarse whisper. If I get you what you want? If you deliver me Julian Croft, she said, her eyes like chips of ice. I will deliver you a life of unimaginable wealth and security. A new face, a new name, and a bank account that will ensure you never have to fear anything again. And you will have your revenge. You will watch from the inside as the man who destroyed your father is utterly, completely annihilated. The choice was monstrous. It was a Faustian bargain of the highest order. My face, my identity, my very manhood, in exchange for a single all-consuming desire, to watch Julian Croft burn. I thought of my father. I thought of the 2 years I had spent rotting in a basement, powerless. I looked at Serafina, at the promise of vengeance in her cold, dark eyes. When do we start? I asked. The next 6 months were a descent into a surreal clinical hell. I was taken to a private, unmarked medical facility in a remote, undisclosed location. It was a place outside of the world, a place where identities were unmade and remade. The process began with the body. A grueling regimen of hormonal therapy was initiated. It was a chemical invasion that systematically began to feminize my form. My muscle mass began to decrease, replaced by a softer distribution of body fat. My skin grew smoother, my body hair thinned. It was a slow, insidious process, a rebellion of my own chemistry. Then came the surgeries. Dr. Finch was not a doctor. He was a sculptor, and my body was his marble. He worked with a terrifying, dispassionate precision. He shaved down my jaw and brow, reshaped my nose, and reduced my Adam's apple until the telltale masculine line of my throat was gone. Each procedure was a fresh wave of pain, a week of blurred, codeine-fueled recovery, and a new unfamiliar face staring back from the mirror. The man I had been was disappearing piece by piece. Ethan Thorne was dying a slow, clinical death on an operating table. While my body healed, my mind was being reprogrammed by Eva. She was a relentless, demanding instructor. Our days were spent in a small, soundproofed room. She deconstructed my every move, my every gesture. "Stop walking with your shoulders," she would command, her voice sharp. "The movement comes from the hips. You are not a soldier. You are a secretary. You do not stride. You glide." She retrained my voice, forcing me to do hours of vocal exercises that stretched and strained my hormonally thinned vocal cords. We worked on creating the perfect pitch and cadence for Anna Scott. Calm, professional, and utterly unremarkable. She taught me the subtleties of feminine body language. How to sit, how to cross my legs, how to tuck a non-existent strand of hair behind my ear. She was teaching me to inhabit a body I didn't yet fully possess. The final, and most profound, part of the transformation came after the primary surgeries had healed. Dr. Finch performed a delicate, state-of-the-art procedure involving subdermal implants and tissue grafts to create the illusion of small, natural-looking breasts. It was the last irreversible step. When I woke from that final surgery, wrapped in bandages, a profound sense of despair washed over me. I looked down at the new soft mounds on my chest. There was no going back. Ethan was gone, not just in face but in form. The mirror in my room now showed a complete stranger. A slender, fine-featured woman with a sad, haunted look in her familiar brown eyes. Serafina visited me for the first time since the process began. She walked into my recovery room, her gaze sweeping over me with the cool appraisal of an investor examining a high-stakes acquisition. "Excellent," she said, a note of satisfaction in her voice. "The physical transformation is complete. You are a blank canvas. Now Eva will teach you how to be Anna." The final phase of the training was the most intensive. With the physical canvas complete, Eva's job was to paint the masterpiece of deception. We moved from the medical facility to a secure, luxurious apartment that was a perfect replica of the one Anna Scott would have. It was my stage, and I was in rehearsal from dawn until dusk. Eva was no longer just a coach. She was a director, and my life was her film. She curated Anna's entire existence. We chose her wardrobe, a collection of elegant, understated blouses, pencil skirts, and tailored dresses in a muted palette of gray, navy, and beige. "Anna is competent, not flashy," Eva would say, dismissing a silk blouse that was a shade too bright. "Her clothes are a uniform, not a statement." We created her backstory. A quiet upbringing in the Midwest, a degree from a respectable but not elite business school, a steady but unremarkable career path. Anna Scott was the epitome of quiet, reliable competence. She was utterly forgettable, which was the entire point. But the training went deeper than clothes and a fictional CV. It was about the mind. "You can't think like Ethan anymore," Eva told me one evening as we sat across from each other. "Ethan is aggressive. He analyzes, he attacks, he looks for the weakness. Anna is different. She is passive. She observes. She anticipates needs. She is a facilitator, not a predator. You need to change the very structure of your thoughts." This was the hardest part. My entire career had been built on a predatory instinct for the market. She forced me to spend hours performing mundane secretarial tasks, organizing schedules, booking appointments, transcribing documents. She was trying to break the analyst and build the assistant. The final test came a week before the interview with Croft. Serafina arranged a social simulation. She hired a team of actors to play corporate executives at a cocktail party held in a rented hotel suite. My Anna's job was to attend, mingle, and be the perfect, unobtrusive assistant to one of Serafina's associates. I walked into that suite, my heart hammering in my newly constructed chest. I was wearing a simple, elegant black dress and low heels. My hair, a professionally styled and colored brunette wig, was cut in a sensible chin-length bob. My makeup was subtle, flawless. I was terrified. But as the evening wore on, a strange thing happened. I found myself falling into the role. I fetched drinks. I took notes discreetly. I smiled politely and laughed at the appropriate moments. I used the softer, higher voice Eva had drilled into me. The actors, seasoned professionals, treated me exactly as I was presenting. As Anna Scott, a quiet, efficient assistant. They looked at me but they didn't see me. I was a ghost in a black dress. The performance was a success. The night before the interview, Serafina gave me my final instructions. "He will try to intimidate you," she said, her voice a low, intense whisper. "He will test you. He will look for weakness. Do not give him any. Be calm. Be competent. Be forgettable. And remember," she added, her dark eyes locking onto mine, "inside this woman is the man who hates him more than anyone on earth. Use that. Let it be the ice in your veins." The offices of Croft Enterprises were an opulent monument to one man's ego. Black marble, gleaming chrome, and giant abstract paintings that were probably worth more than a small country's GDP. It was a cold, intimidating space designed to make visitors feel small. Walking through the lobby, the quiet, feminine click of my heels on the marble floor was a stark contrast to the heavy, masculine stride I remembered. I was Anna Scott. My suit was a conservative charcoal gray, my makeup was flawless, and my face was a calm, neutral mask. But inside, my heart was a trapped bird, beating frantically against the cage of my ribs. The ice in my veins that Serafina had spoken of felt more like a churning sea of nausea. Julian Croft's office was on the top floor. It was vast and surprisingly minimalist, dominated by a single massive desk and a floor-to-ceiling window with a god's-eye view of the city. And there he was. He was sitting behind the desk, a predator in his natural habitat. He was older than I remembered, with threads of silver in his dark hair, but the same cruel, intelligent eyes and the same arrogant smirk. The man who had destroyed my father. The man who had destroyed me. The wave of pure, unadulterated hatred that washed over me was so intense it was dizzying. I had to physically grip the leather portfolio in my hands to keep them from shaking. Be Anna, I told myself, the mantra, a lifeline in the storm. Be forgettable. "Miss Scott," he said, his voice a smooth, confident baritone that I remembered from a dozen nightmares. He didn't stand. He just gestured to the chair opposite his desk. "Thank you for coming in." The interview was a brutal exercise in psychological warfare. He asked sharp, probing questions, not just about my fictional resume, but about my opinions, my ambitions. He was testing my intelligence, looking for the slightest hint of a threat. "Why do you want to be an assistant?" he asked, leaning back in his chair, his eyes narrowed. "A woman with your qualifications. It seems like a lack of ambition." I gave him the answer Eva had coached me on for weeks. "I don't crave the spotlight, Mr. Croft," I said, my voice calm and even. "I find satisfaction in facilitating the success of others, in creating order out of chaos. That is where my ambition lies." He watched me, a flicker of something. Was it surprise? Respect. In his eyes. The final test was the cruelest. He slid a tablet across the desk. "This is a press release from a few years ago," he said, his tone casual. "A minor acquisition. Please proofread it for me." I looked down at the screen. It was the press release announcing the successful merger with Thorne Industries, my father's company. It was a sanitized corporate lie that painted the brutal destruction of a man's life's work as a triumphant business deal. My vision tunneled. The words blurred. I could feel the blood pounding in my ears. This was it. He was trying to break me. I took a slow, deliberate breath. I summoned every ounce of the ice Serafina had spoken of. I picked up the stylus and began to make minor, professional corrections to the grammar and punctuation. I treated the document that was the obituary of my former life as just another piece of paperwork. When I was done, I slid it back across the desk. "There were a few typos in the third paragraph, Mr. Croft," I said, my voice perfectly steady. "I've corrected them." He stared at me for a long, silent moment. I met his gaze without flinching. Finally, a slow, satisfied smile spread across his face. "You start Monday," he said. I had done it. I had walked into the lion's den, and the lion had just invited me in for dinner. The first few weeks as Anna Scott were a masterclass in controlled paranoia. I was not just an assistant, I was a spy living a double, triple life. My apartment was a sterile, secure location provided by Serafina, swept for bugs daily. Every evening I would debrief with her via a secure, encrypted channel reporting on Croft's meetings, his calls, his habits. I was a ghost in the machine, a silent observer in the heart of my enemy's empire. My performance was flawless. I was the perfect assistant, efficient, discreet, and utterly invisible. I anticipated Croft's needs before he was aware of them himself. I organized his chaotic schedule, managed his correspondence, and stood as a silent, polite barrier between him and the outside world. He was a demanding, tyrannical boss, but he was also brilliant. I was forced into a strange, disquieting intimacy with his mind, seeing the ruthless genius with which he ran his empire. I saw the man who had destroyed my father, but I also saw the architect of that destruction. And to my horror, a dark, traitorous part of my old analyst's brain respected the sheer, brutal artistry of it. But the real complication wasn't Julian Croft. It was his daughter, Isabella. She appeared at the office one afternoon without an appointment, a whirlwind of paint-splattered jeans, combat boots, and fiery indignation. She was the polar opposite of her father's cold, corporate world. She had a cascade of wild, dark hair, and her father's intelligent eyes, but hers were filled with a passionate, rebellious fire. "I need to see him," she demanded, slamming a hand down on my perfectly organized desk. "I'm sorry, Mr. Croft is in a meeting," I replied, my voice the calm, placid tone of Anna Scott. "Do you have an appointment?" "An appointment?" she scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. "I'm his daughter, not his dentist. Tell him I'm here." Her presence was a disruption, a chaotic variable I hadn't been prepared for. When I informed Croft of her arrival, a flicker of annoyance, but also something else, something that looked almost like fear, crossed his features. "5 minutes, Anna," he said, "and stay in the room." The conversation that followed was a brutal verbal sparring match. She was an artist, living in a warehouse studio downtown. He had, without her knowledge, bought the entire building and was planning to demolish it to build luxury condos. "You can't do this," she raged, her voice shaking with fury. "It's not just my home. It's a community. Dozens of artists will be displaced." "It's a sound business decision, Isabella," he replied, his voice a cold, dismissive wall. "I'll find you a new studio. A better one." "I don't want a better one," she shot back. "I don't want anything from you. Can't you understand that?" I stood by the door, a silent, invisible observer to this family civil war. And as I watched Isabella, this fierce, passionate woman who despised her father as much as I did, I felt a strange, unexpected pang of kinship. She was a victim of his tyranny just as I was. We were on the same side. The meeting ended with Isabella storming out, her eyes blazing with unshed tears of fury. As she passed my desk, she paused for a fraction of a second. Our eyes met. "You're new," she said, her voice a low, accusatory murmur. "Don't let him consume you." And then she was gone, leaving a trail of ozone and the scent of turpentine in the sterile corporate air. Her warning and the desperate, fiery look in her eyes stayed with me long after she had left. She was a complication, and a dangerous, captivating one at that. Isabella Croft became a regular, disruptive presence in the office. She would appear unannounced, always to argue with her father about some new injustice, a charity he'd gutted, a historic building he was threatening. Their relationship was a scorched earth battleground, and I, as Anna Scott, was the silent, unwilling witness. But a strange, unspoken connection began to form between me and Isabella. After her explosive arguments with her father, she would often linger by my desk for a moment, as if gathering her composure before facing the outside world again. "He's in a particularly charming mood today," she'd say, her voice dripping with sarcasm, but her eyes would be searching mine, looking for something. A crack in my professional facade. An ally. I maintained my role as the perfect, neutral assistant. But my sympathy for her must have shown, because she kept coming back. Our brief, post-argument debriefs evolved into longer conversations. She would talk about her art, about her frustration with her father's suffocating control. I was a safe person to talk to, a corporate ghost who, she assumed, had no opinions of her own. "He doesn't understand," she said one afternoon, her voice soft with a rare vulnerability. "He thinks he can buy anything. A building, a company, a daughter. He doesn't get that some things aren't for sale." I just nodded, my heart giving a painful throb of recognition. We were both things Julian Croft thought he owned. Serafina was not pleased with this development. "The daughter is an unpredictable variable," she warned me during one of our nightly debriefs. "Your objective is Croft, not his estranged child. Do not get involved. She is a distraction." But I was already involved. I found myself looking forward to Isabella's chaotic appearances. Her fiery passion was a stark, welcome contrast to the cold, calculated world of Croft and Serafina. She was real. She was a reminder of a world outside this dark, elaborate game of revenge. The situation escalated one evening. I was working late, finalizing a report for Croft. Isabella appeared at the office, long after everyone else had gone home. She was distraught, her eyes red-rimmed from crying. "He did it," she whispered, her voice trembling. "He sent the final eviction notices. We all have to be out in 30 days. She looked so lost, so utterly defeated, that something inside me broke. The carefully constructed wall of Anna Scott crumbled. "I'm sorry," I said, and for the first time, the voice was not the placid professional alto of the assistant. It was softer, filled with a genuine unscripted empathy. She looked at me, a flicker of surprise in her eyes. "You are. He has no right to destroy a community for the sake of another skyscraper," I said, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. It was a thought from Ethan, the man who had seen his own father's life's work destroyed for the same reason. Isabella stared at me, a long searching look. "You're not like the others," she said slowly. "There's more to you than just filing reports." She took a step closer to my desk, her gaze intense. "My friends and I, we're having a meeting tonight at my studio to figure out how to fight him. A protest, a legal challenge. Anything. You probably know his schedule, his weaknesses. You should come, Anna. Help us." It was a direct invitation to commit treason. It was a catastrophic breach of my protocol. Serafina would see it as an unforgivable betrayal. But as I looked at Isabella's desperate, hopeful face, I knew I couldn't say no. I was already a traitor. The only question was, to whom? The art studio was a world away from the sterile opulence of Croft Enterprises. It was a vast, chaotic space in a converted warehouse, smelling of turpentine, clay, and damp concrete. Giant, abstract canvases leaned against the walls, and half-finished sculptures, draped in cloth, stood like shrouded ghosts. Isabella was there with a small group of other artists, their faces a mixture of defiant anger and weary despair. They were planning a protest, a media campaign. It was a valiant David and Goliath effort, and I knew it was doomed to fail. Julian Croft didn't lose these kinds of battles. Anna was an anomaly in their midst. The quiet, impeccably dressed woman in the corner. I gave them what information I could. Croft's travel schedule, the names of the city council members he had been meeting with, the PR firm he used for damage control. It was low-level procedural information, but to them it felt like vital intelligence from behind enemy lines. Isabella watched me the entire night, a new intense curiosity in her gaze. She saw the quiet competence, the analytical mind, but she also saw something else. A shared enemy, a shared purpose. As the meeting broke up, she walked me to the door. "Thank you for coming, Anna," she said, her voice a low, intimate murmur in the quiet studio. "You were a huge help. You're very brave." "I'm not brave," I said, the words tasting like ash. "I'm just his assistant." "No," she said, stopping me. She reached out and gently touched my arm. The contact was a small, simple gesture, but it sent a jolt like an electric current, right through me. "You're more than that." The lie I was living was becoming impossibly complex. I was betraying Serafina by helping Isabella. I was betraying Isabella by being a complete fabrication. And I was betraying myself by developing feelings for the one person in the world I should be staying away from. Serafina, of course, found out. Her surveillance was absolute. The next evening, she summoned me not to her penthouse, but to a cold, empty parking garage, a clear signal of her displeasure. You went to her studio, she said, her voice dangerously calm as she emerged from the shadows between two concrete pillars. You gave them information. You chose to align yourself with the variable I explicitly warned you to avoid. It was low-level information, I countered, my own voice shaking slightly. It won't affect our long-term plan. That is not for you to decide, she hissed, taking a step closer, her face a mask of cold fury. Your job is to be an asset, not a double agent in some pathetic bohemian rebellion. Your sympathy for the girl is a liability. It is a weakness. And I do not tolerate weakness in my operations. She paused, her dark eyes searching mine. Perhaps you need a reminder of what is at stake. Of who you are. She pulled out her phone and played a short audio file. It was a recording of a man's voice, rough and low. My voice. Ethan's voice. It was a clip from an old interview I had done years ago, when my father's company was still thriving. Hearing it was a gut punch. A voice from a ghost. That man is dead, Serafina said, her voice like ice. Anna Scott buried him. Do not for 1 second forget that. Do not let some misguided, sentimental attachment to that girl make you forget the mission. Or I will burn you both. Serafina's threat was a chilling, effective reminder of the cage I was in. The memory of Ethan's voice, a ghost from a past I could never reclaim, solidified the ice in my veins. I pulled back from Isabella, retreating once more into the cool, detached persona of Anna Scott. I stopped attending the artists' meetings. When Isabella came to the office, my demeanor was polite, professional, and distant. I was a fortress of quiet efficiency. She noticed the change immediately. The warmth and kinship that had begun to grow between us was gone, replaced by a frustrating, impenetrable wall. What's wrong, Anna? She asked one day, her voice a mixture of confusion and hurt after I had coolly deflected her attempts at conversation. Did he get to you? Did my father threaten you? My job is to assist Mr. Croft, I said, my voice the flat, practiced alto of the perfect secretary. I cannot be involved in your personal disputes. The look of betrayal in her eyes was a fresh, twisting knife in my gut. I was pushing away the only person in this entire miserable charade who had shown me any genuine human connection. But Serafina's threat lingered. I had to protect Isabella, and the only way to do that was to make her hate me. Meanwhile, the mission was escalating. Serafina had a new objective. Croft is about to close a massive illegal arms deal through a shell corporation, she informed me during a debrief. It's the dirtiest secret in his empire. The proof is not on the company servers. He's too smart for that. It will be on his personal laptop in his private office in his home. His home? I asked, my blood running cold. I don't have access to his home. You will, Serafina said, a predatory glint in her eyes. Croft is hosting his annual corporate gala in 2 weeks. It's at his estate. As his personal assistant, you will be required to be there to manage the event from the inside. That will be your window. You will get me the data from that laptop, Anna. It's the kill shot. It's what we've been working towards all this time. The gala was the social event of the season, a glittering affair for the city's corporate elite. For me, it was the endgame, a high-wire act with no safety net. I arrived at the Croft estate, a vast, soulless mansion of glass and stone, feeling a strange, fatalistic calm. I was wearing an elegant, understated black evening gown, my hair swept up in a sophisticated chignon. I was the perfect image of Anna Scott, a ghost gliding through the gilded rooms. I saw Isabella across the crowded ballroom. She was there out of familial obligation, her face a mask of bored contempt. She was wearing a stunning, defiant red dress, a slash of color in a sea of black and gray. Our eyes met and she looked away, a flicker of pain in her expression before it was replaced by icy indifference. My opportunity came late in the evening. As Croft was schmoozing with a group of investors, I slipped away from the party. I knew the layout of the house from the schematics Serafina had provided. His private office was on the 2nd floor, at the end of a long, quiet corridor. My heart pounded as I picked the simple lock on the office door, a skill I'd had to learn in the last week. The office was dark and silent. I found the laptop on his massive mahogany desk. I inserted a small, encrypted USB drive, Serafina's digital skeleton key. The data transfer began, a small green bar slowly crawling across the screen. It would take 10 minutes. 10 agonizingly long minutes. 5 minutes in, I heard a sound from the hallway. Footsteps. Soft, hesitant footsteps, followed by the quiet click of the office door opening. I ducked behind the massive desk, my blood turning to ice. The door swung open, and a figure stepped into the room, silhouetted by the light from the hallway. It was Isabella. "Anna," Isabella whispered into the darkness, her voice uncertain. "I saw you come up here. Is everything all right?" I remained frozen behind the desk, praying she would think the room was empty and leave. The small green light of the USB drive, still plugged into the laptop, blinked like a tiny malevolent eye in the shadows. Isabella stepped further into the room, letting the door click softly shut behind her. She wasn't leaving. She moved with a familiar, restless energy, walking towards the massive window that overlooked the sprawling, brightly lit gardens. "I hate these parties," she said, more to herself than to me. "It's like a convention of souls for sale." She sighed, a sound of profound weariness. "I don't know why I let him bully me into coming." She turned from the window, and her eyes, now adjusted to the gloom, found me. I slowly rose from my hiding place behind the desk. My face was a mask of calculated calm, but my heart was hammering against my ribs. "Miss Croft," I said, my voice the cool, professional alto of Anna Scott. "I was just fetching a file for your father." It was a flimsy lie, and we both knew it. Isabella's gaze was sharp, suspicious. "A file?" In the dark. Her eyes flickered to the desk, and she saw it. The tiny blinking green light of the USB drive. Her expression changed from suspicion to a dawning, horrified understanding. "What are you doing, Anna?" she asked, her voice a low, dangerous whisper. "It's not what it looks like," I said, my mind racing for a plausible explanation that didn't exist. "Isn't it?" she countered, taking a step closer. "It looks like you're stealing from him. Corporate espionage. Is that what this is? Are you working for one of his rivals?" The accusation, so close to the truth and yet so far, hung in the air. "You have to leave," I said, my voice firm. "Now. This doesn't concern you." "The hell it doesn't," she shot back, her voice rising with a mixture of anger and betrayal. "I knew there was something more to you. I confided in you. I thought you were on my side. This is not a game, Isabella," I warned, my eyes darting to the laptop screen. The progress bar was at 90%. So close. "Then what is it?" she demanded, her voice cracking. "Who are you?" At that moment we both heard it. The sound of heavy, confident footsteps approaching in the hallway, coming straight towards the office. It was her father. Panic, stark and absolute, seized me. There was no escape. We were both trapped. Isabella's eyes widened in fear. In a split second she made a decision. She wasn't just a rebel, she was a survivor. She knew what her father was capable of. Just as the doorknob began to turn, she lunged forward. Not at me, but at the lamp on the corner of the desk, knocking it to the floor with a loud crash. Then she grabbed me, her hands surprisingly strong, and pulled me with her into the shadows of a large alcove near the window, hidden by a heavy velvet curtain. She pressed me against the cold wall, her body shielding mine, her hand clamped firmly over my mouth. "Don't make a sound," she breathed, her lips close to my ear. The office door swung open. Julian Croft stood in the doorway, his face a mask of thunderous rage. "What the hell is going on in here?" he bellowed, pressed together in the suffocating darkness of the alcove. I could feel the frantic, terrified thrum of Isabella's heart against my back. My own was a deafening drum in my ears. Croft flicked on the lights. The office was instantly flooded with a harsh, unforgiving glare. "Isabella!" he barked, his eyes scanning the room. "I know you're in here. What was that crash?" He saw the overturned lamp. He walked over to his desk, his gaze sweeping over its surface. My blood ran cold. He would see the USB drive. It was over. But the progress bar on the screen had vanished. The transfer was complete. With a silent automatic process, the drive had erased its own presence, leaving the laptop screen exactly as it had been. Serafina's technology was flawless. "Just admiring the view, Daddy," Isabella's voice came from the window. She stepped out from the alcove, leaving me hidden in the shadows of the curtain. Her movements were a fluid, calculated performance. She was blocking his line of sight to me. I stumbled in the dark, she said with a cool, dismissive shrug. You should invest in better lighting. Croft's eyes narrowed, his suspicion palpable. You were in here snooping. Snooping for what? She scoffed. Your hidden collection of human souls? No thanks. I was just looking for a quiet place away from your sycophantic guests. Her defiance, her sheer brazen nerve was breathtaking. She was deliberately drawing his fire, creating a diversion. The tense standoff was broken by a soft chime from the intercom on his desk. It was the head of his security detail. Mr. Croft, sorry to disturb you, but the Minister of Finance is about to leave. The interruption broke the spell. Croft's attention shifted, his mind returning to the more important business of networking. He gave Isabella one last, withering glare. We will discuss this later, he said, his voice a low threat. And find someone to clean up this mess. He stormed out of the office, leaving the door ajar. Isabella waited until the sound of his footsteps had faded completely. She let out a long, shaky breath and leaned back against the window, her body trembling slightly. She turned to the alcove, her eyes finding me in the shadows. You can come out now, she said, her voice a weary, strained whisper. I stepped out, my own legs feeling unsteady. I walked over to the desk and with a hand that shook uncontrollably, removed the USB drive from the laptop. I slipped it into a hidden pocket in my evening gown. Isabella watched my every move, her arms crossed over her chest. The rebellious fire in her eyes had been replaced by a cold, hard disillusionment. So, she said, her voice flat. It's true. You are a spy. All that talk about sympathy, about understanding. That was all an act. No, I said, my own voice raw and unsteady. That part was real. Was it? She asked, her voice laced with a bitterness that cut deeper than any accusation. You have 5 minutes to tell me who you are, and what the hell is going on. And it had better be the truth. You owe me that much. You owe me for saving your perfectly tailored lying ass. Standing in the harsh light of her father's office, with the adrenaline of the near disaster still coursing through my veins, I knew the game was up. Serafina's threats, the mission, the entire elaborate architecture of the lie, it all became secondary to the raw, irrefutable fact that Isabella had just saved me. I owed her the truth, or at least a version of it she could comprehend. My name isn't Anna Scott. I began, my voice a low, unsteady whisper. And I'm not what you think I am. I'm aware of that, she said, her arms still crossed, her expression a mask of guarded impatience. My real name. It doesn't matter anymore. I continued, choosing my words with agonizing care. But my father, he was a man named Robert Thorne. Isabella's eyes widened slightly. The name clearly meant something to her. Thorne Industries, she breathed. The tech company. My father took it over a few years ago. There was a scandal. The founder. He killed himself. I finished for her, the words tasting like poison. He jumped from his office window the day the acquisition was finalized. Julian Croft destroyed him. He destroyed my family. He took everything from me. The confession hung in the silent, opulent room. I was no longer Anna Scott, the efficient assistant or a corporate spy. I was the ghost of her father's victim, a specter of his past sins, standing in the heart of his empire. Isabella stared at me, her face a storm of conflicting emotions. Disbelief, shock, dawning horror, and then a flicker of something that looked like comprehension. The pieces were clicking into place for her. My presence, my access, my strange, sad demeanor. You're his son, she whispered, the realization hitting her. Ethan Thorne. I remember reading about it. The papers said you disappeared. I just nodded, my throat too tight to speak. But how? She asked, her gaze sweeping over me, over the evening gown, the sophisticated updo, the female form she had only ever known. This is impossible. Nothing is impossible when you have enough money and a complete lack of morality, I said, the words a bitter echo of Serafina's philosophy. I made a deal. I gave up my old life, my old face. Everything. For a chance at revenge. The data on that drive, I said, my hand instinctively going to the hidden pocket, is the proof of a crime that will finally put him away. It's the weapon I was built to deliver. She looked at me, truly looked at me as if for the first time. She wasn't seeing Anna Scott anymore. She was seeing the impossible, tragic truth. She was seeing a man so consumed by a rightful quest for vengeance that he had allowed himself to be erased, to be rebuilt into the perfect hollow weapon. Her anger and betrayal seemed to melt away, replaced by a profound, horrified pity. "My God," she whispered, running a hand through her wild, dark hair. "He didn't just destroy your father. He turned you into a monster, too." "No," I corrected, my voice cold and hard with the truth of my mission. "He turned me into his monster. And now I'm going to burn him to the ground." The confession changed everything between us. The fragile, budding friendship, the unspoken attraction. It was all burned away, replaced by the stark, brutal clarity of the truth. We were no longer Anna and Isabella. We were the children of two warring houses, two ghosts tied together by the sins of our fathers. "You need to leave," Isabella said, her voice regaining a measure of its usual command. "Now, before he comes back. Give me the drive." I hesitated. My mission, my entire purpose for the last year, was contained in that tiny piece of plastic. It belonged to Serafina. "Trust me," she insisted, seeing the doubt in my eyes. "My father might be a monster, but he's my monster. I know how his security works. They will have a log of everyone who entered this office. They will find you. I can get this to the right people. People my father can't buy or threaten. But you need to disappear." She was right. Anna Scott was now a liability. Her cover was blown, not just to Isabella, but potentially to Croft himself if he started connecting the dots. With a sense of fatalistic surrender, I handed her the USB drive. It felt like handing over my entire reason for being. "What will you do?" I asked. "I'm going to finish what you started," she said, her eyes blazing with a new, cold fire. "But I'm going to do it my way." She guided me out of the office through a private service exit she knew from her childhood, an escape route from a life she'd always been trying to flee. We stood for a moment in a quiet, sterile service corridor. "Where will you go?" she asked, her voice softer now. "I don't know," I admitted. The plan had never extended beyond this moment. Anna Scott will cease to exist tonight. And Ethan Thorne, he's been dead for a year. The tragedy of my situation, the absolute void of my future, hung in the air between us. In that moment, Isabella did something that shattered the last of my icy resolve. She reached out and gently cupped my face in her hands. Her touch was warm, a stark contrast to the cold, constructed woman I had become. "He took your face," she whispered, her thumb stroking the line of the jaw Dr. Finch had so carefully sculpted. "Don't let him take the rest of you." And then she leaned in and kissed me. It wasn't a passionate kiss. It was a kiss of grief, of kinship, of a shared impossible sorrow. It was a farewell to Anna Scott, a eulogy for Ethan Thorne, and a desperate human connection in the ruins of both our lives. She pulled away, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Go," she said. "Disappear. Be free." And then she turned and walked away, leaving me alone in the sterile corridor. The phantom feeling of her lips on mine, the only proof that any of it had been real at all. Disappearing was a skill I had inadvertently been trained for. I slipped out of the gala, a ghost leaving her own haunting. I didn't go back to the secure apartment. I walked. For hours I walked through the sleeping city, the elegant evening gown and heels, a bizarre costume for a woman with no name and no future. I knew Serafina would be looking for me. I had delivered the package, but not to her. I had broken the contract, gone rogue. In her world, that made me a loose end, a liability to be erased. At dawn, I found a cheap, cash-only motel on the city's grimy industrial fringe. I used the last of the emergency money Serafina had provided to pay for a week. In the room, I stood in front of the cracked, water-stained mirror. Anna Scott stared back at me. The perfect hair, the flawless makeup, the elegant posture. It was all a lie. A beautiful, tragic, and now incredibly dangerous lie. With a visceral, desperate need to shed the skin I was in, I began to deconstruct her. I ripped off the expensive wig, revealing my own short, matted hair underneath. I scrubbed my face raw with cheap motel soap, washing away the mask until the pale, surgically altered face of a stranger was left. I tore the gown, the fabric ripping with a satisfying sound of finality. I was no one. Not Ethan, not Anna. Just a collection of spare parts in a cheap motel room, waiting for the end. The news broke 3 days later. It was an explosion. Julian Croft arrested in international arms trafficking ring. The headlines screamed. The story was everywhere. Anonymous sources had leaked an encrypted data file to a consortium of international journalists. The evidence was irrefutable, detailing illegal sales, offshore accounts, and communication with terrorist organizations. Isabella had done it. She had bypassed the slow, corruptible legal system and gone straight for the jugular global public opinion. Croft Enterprises' stock plummeted. His board of directors resigned en masse. His empire was crumbling. I watched it all on the small flickering TV in my room, a strange hollow feeling in my chest. It wasn't the triumphant, satisfying fire I had imagined. It was just a quiet, sad implosion. The ghost of my father could finally rest. My revenge was complete, and I felt nothing but empty. I knew I had to leave the city, to vanish completely before Serafina's reach found me. On the last day of my prepaid week at the motel, I was packing my few meager belongings when there was a soft knock on the door. My blood ran cold. It was them. I braced myself, my hand gripping the heavy base of a table lamp. I opened the door. It wasn't Serafina's men. It was Isabella. She stood there looking tired but resolute. She was dressed in her usual uniform of jeans and a leather jacket. "I figured this is where you'd be," she said, her voice quiet. "You always did have a taste for the dramatic." She held up a small, heavy envelope. My father. He had certain accounts that weren't tied to the company. Private ones. He won't be needing them anymore. She pushed the envelope into my hand. "This is a fraction of what he took from your father. A down payment on the debt. It's enough for a new start. A real one." Inside the envelope was a passport with a new name I didn't recognize, and stacks of foreign currency. "It's not a monster's payoff or a spy's reward," she said, her eyes searching mine. "It's from me. A chance to find out who you are when you're not playing a part for anyone." The envelope in my hand was a lifeline, a clean slate. It was an escape, not just from Serafina, but from the ghosts of Ethan Thorne and Anna Scott. "Where will you go?" I asked, my voice raspy. "I'm staying," Isabella said, a determined glint in her eyes. "I'm going to be there when they dismantle what's left of his company. I'm going to make sure the money goes to the people he hurt. I'm going to turn that warehouse of ours into a real, permanent artist co-op." She was no longer just the rebel, she was a rebuilder. "And then?" I pressed, a selfish, desperate hope flickering in the void of my chest. A sad, wise smile touched her lips. "And then, I'm going to learn how to paint without so much anger." She took a step back, creating a space between us that felt both like a mile and an inch. "The passport is for a flight to Buenos Aires. It leaves in 3 hours. It's a good place to disappear. A good place to find a new name that fits." The finality in her voice was absolute. This wasn't a "come with me." It was a "go be free." She had given me a weapon, a future, and now she was giving me an exit. Our shared violent story was over. "Isabella," I began, my heart aching with all the things I wanted to say, all the gratitude and the impossible, nascent feelings that had grown in the ruins. "Don't," she said softly, cutting me off. She reached out and touched my face, her fingers tracing the jawline of the stranger she had come to know. "Maybe someday, years from now, a man I've never met will walk into a gallery in a city I've never been to. And maybe he'll have your eyes." She let her hand drop. "Goodbye, Ethan," she whispered, using the name like a final, gentle eulogy. And then she turned and walked away, her footsteps echoing down the cheap motel corridor until she was gone. I left that night. I took the flight. Buenos Aires was a vibrant, chaotic city that didn't care about my past. The man with the new name on the passport slowly began to take shape. The permanent, surgical changes to my face were a constant reminder of the life I had left behind. But they were also a mask that allowed me to build a new one. I never became a star analyst again. I found a quiet life, working with numbers in a small import-export business. I let my hair grow out. I bought clothes that felt comfortable, a strange mix of masculine and feminine styles that belonged to no one but myself. The ice in my veins, placed there by Serafina, finally began to melt, leaving behind a quiet, profound sadness. I never saw Isabella again, but sometimes late at night I would search for her online. I found articles about the Croft Foundation for the Arts, a thriving organization that had revitalized a whole district of the city. I saw pictures of her at gallery openings, her face no longer filled with anger, but with a calm, focused passion. She was rebuilding just as she said she would. And in those quiet moments, I would look at my own reflection in the dark screen, at the face of the stranger who was me. I had my revenge. I had my freedom. And I knew that in the end, Julian Croft hadn't just turned me into a monster. He had inadvertently led me to the one person in the world who had the grace to turn me back into a man, by letting me go free and clear.